Welcome to the life you crave. Simple and sustainable weight loss for women who have better things to do than diet. I'm your host, Leah Pinelli. I help ambitious, badass women stop overeating, overworking, and overgiving to lose weight from a place of love. I'll help you simplify weight loss, end your overwhelm, and create the life you crave. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Let's get started. So thrilled to have the amazing Kelsey Edwards on the show today. Kelsey is an actress and singer-songwriter, best known for her role as Abby in Minor Details, a film loved by girls of all ages. She can be seen as the spokesperson in dozens of viral ads, has played opposite celebrities like Jennette McCurdy and Tony Hale, and has been nominated for several awards. Across social media, Kelsey is known as and I love this, she is known as the internet big sister. And her primary goal is to help inspire teen girls to find confidence and self-love. That, by the way, you guys, is why Kelsey is on the show today. I cannot wait for you to hear about her work in that arena. She's also passionate about encouraging others to create the life of their dreams. Kelsey recently sang the national anthem for the Lakers and completed a 2-month solo trip across Southeast Asia. Two things that were once on her bucket list. I love a woman who is checking off the bucket list, Kelsey. When she's not working, you can almost always find Kelsey playing with her toy poodle Macy, planning her next trip, or working on her next business idea. Catch her in the new comedy TV series, Underdeveloped, releasing soon. Kelsey, welcome to the Life You Crave podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. Before we hit record, you guys, Kelsey and I were just chatting because Kelsey and I kind of found each other because we have similar passions in life and similar missions and similar ambitions. And I, previous to being a life coach and being the host of this podcast, once worked only with teenage girls to do exactly the work that Kelsey Edwards is out there doing in the world. So I'm super excited to have her on today. Kelsey, tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us about how you became Kelsey Edwards.
Yeah. First off, I just want to say I love how in sync our missions are. I think that's so cool the way that worked out. How did I become Kelsey Edwards? Well, I was born, and then I went through. As a kid, I was a homeschooled child actor, which we talked a little bit about, but I had a very different childhood than most people. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. I never went to public school until I was 17, which is a story for later or another time. But I lived my whole life being homeschooled, acting, and I was also very heavily in the Mormon Church, or it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but people know it as the Mormon Church. So yeah, my upbringing was a little bit different, and I loved it. I had a great time. I'm so grateful that I got to start acting as a kid because it's what I do now. And I feel like I have a lot to owe to my parents for that. Thank you for getting me started in that as a kid. And so that's kind of where I started out. And then as a teenager, I grew up and continued acting. I had some interesting situations with everything, which I'm sure we'll get deeper into, but that's kind of where it all started. And eventually I moved to Utah after my parents got divorced, and then eventually I moved to LA, and that's where I am now. So that's a quick summary.
Yeah, it's a quick summary. And so tell us a little bit about your work and what you're passionate about. I mean, I read it in your bio. You're really passionate about helping girls find that self-love, confidence. And we also talked a little bit about relationships, because we know that, in those adolescent years, right, navigating relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but friendships in particular, is so challenging. So what made you decide that you really wanted to dive in and become a mentor to girls in this way?
Yeah, well, I had a lot of difficulties as a teenager myself. I really struggled with my body image. I had an eating disorder that was very severe. I battled that for maybe 6 years on and off, and it was really hard for me. I dealt with a lot of anxiety. I still do. I still deal with anxiety. I've dealt with a lot of at times I had depressive episodes, or, as a teenager, you're dealing with a lot of issues. I struggled with friendships. I struggled with feeling lonely at times. So I guess the short answer to questions, I feel like my motivation to do this came from wishing I had had this as a teenager. I didn't have a big sister. I have an older brother and I have a younger brother, but I never had a big sister to like be able to talk to about this stuff. And my mom is wonderful. But there's something different about the relationship of having like a sister, that you can like chat with about this stuff and get her advice on. So I feel like I learned a lot growing up, and I'm still learning, but learning about how to maintain friends, how to find self love, how to not come from a place of codependency in your relationships. That's huge, especially if you come from some sort of environment that's like a broken home, like I did. You have to learn how to have that like ability to rely on yourself, so that you can bring that to your relationships. So I feel like I've learned a lot about the power of mindset, about confidence, about self love, about body image. And because I have learned so much, I would love to be able to help teen girls like maybe save some years, save some stress,
Wow.
save some, anxiety that I dealt with.
Yeah.
They can have a big sister that they can look to for some of this advice. Then, I mean, that's all I want.
Yes. So if you're comfortable, do you want to share with us a little bit about your struggle with, like you said, body image and your relationship with food?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's been an ongoing struggle for me in my life, as I feel like it probably is for most women. Um, I love my mom so much, and I know that she also has had her own body image issues over the years. And I think that as girls, we learn a lot from our mothers. We learn a lot from their, struggles, the way they speak about themselves, the way that they talk about their bodies. And so I think that I um, learned from watching her and her dieting. I also learned from watching the media. I also am an actor, so I was very heavily in the
Yeah.
film industry, right? Which has like really strong expectations of a woman's body. I didn't think that I would be cast in things. I didn't think that I would be desirable or like, a lead or whatever if I didn't look a certain way. And then also, like I mentioned, my struggles kind of played in from I did grow up in the LDS church. And there's a heavy emphasis on the sanctity of your body and the importance of modesty and like covering up and like being like just I don't know, virtuous is a good word.
Yeah.
And so I think that all of those elements for me kind of played into this real. Also, I will say that I think when I was a teenager, I dealt with a little bit of like OCD. I've never been diagnosed as OCD, but I
Sure.
was super religious and I was super like by the book. Like everything was just like had to be done just like this. And I'm not really that way anymore. But I think as a teenager, my food was something that I could control. And it
Yeah.
was something that I could do 100% and I could be all the way at. So if I set a goal to be at a certain caloric limit for the day, like I could do that, or if I wanted to burn so many calories within the day, like I could do that. And so anyways, I think all of those aspects of my teenage years, my parents got a divorce, all of these things that were spiraling out of control. I think that it was like the breeding ground for like a really intense eating disorder that I really struggled with I think it really started hitting me about 13 and I didn't really overcome it until I was like 18. And also I had been a little bit chunky. Like I was a little heavier between the ages of 11 and 12 and some
Sure.
people had made fun of me
Mhm.
and it just went too far. Like my attempt to fix that went too far.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So,
when you were a kid and you were growing up in the church, and I know that you kind of talked about how part of it is really wanting to preserve the sanctity of the body. These are part of the things that you were taught, and also that, like you mentioned earlier, kind of protecting you from the community, kind of at large, right? And
mhm.
I'm wondering, but it still sounds like the uh, societal standards that we have for what a woman's body should look like still got through to you. I mean, even though you were maybe living kind of in a more sequestered community, it still impacted you, would you say? Was it the
Yeah,
same messages?
I would say so. I mean, and there were messages like, for example, when I was a teenager, and this is not to say that this is what everybody in the LDS church believes, but somebody had made comments like, oh, girls should not be wearing leggings because it shows the shape of their leg. Right.
Mhm.
So then like 12-year-old Kelsey or 13-year-old Kelsey received that like, showing my body is bad. The shape of my leg is bad. And in my inability to decipher messages, it all kind of blended into, well, then I have to hide my body. I have to cover my body. I'm ashamed of my body. And I also like like I would not wear swimsuits. I swear when I was a teenager, I wore knee-length shorts, like knee-length shorts and a big baggy t-shirt. Like I would not wear a swimsuit because I was so ashamed of my body. And I felt like it was a mix of needing to be modest and also hating my body. And like, it was just kind of this like really, yeah, not good melting pot for me. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm so curious because you're obviously very aware now of, I mean, the shame that you were experiencing. And I talk a lot with clients about how shame almost always, I want to say always, but I'll try not to be, too black or white about it, but shame leads to, and Brené Brown talks about this, shame leads to hiding. When we
Yes.
feel shame, we hide, right? And then also that hiding sometimes can result in, like you said, controlling, right? Because I feel like I have to control this thing that I'm feeling like is kind of out of control. It's my body. It's how I was born this way to some extent, but also what I'm eating is impacting it. And therefore the hiding in your clothes, right? Like the hiding in your body piece. So I'm so curious to hear, did you overcome this? Like, how did you become this woman who's like, actually, no, I can do this differently. We can do this differently. And I can help other girls too.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's a really powerful insight about shame too. I don't know if I'd ever made quite that connection that you just made. So thank you for saying that, because that was really eye-opening. Honestly, like, and like trigger warning, I'm sure everyone is aware, at this point, but it got really bad. My eating disorder was really bad. My mom was threatening to hospitalize me. I was probably like 75 pounds. My hair was falling out. Like my skin was like gray. My nails were like brittle and cracking and yellow. I was like gray and yellow. And my mom was like, bless her heart, she didn't know what to do. She'd never dealt with a daughter who had an eating disorder. And she was like, listen, I don't know what to do here. Like if you can't get this under control. And my mom's a therapist now. She has amazing coping skills and things now. But at the time, she was like, I don't know what to do. Like I think we're gonna need to put you in the hospital. And there was enough fear around that like that was like my worst nightmare. Like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me, right? And as a perfectionist and as someone who like has to do everything right and just be in control and blah blah blah, like this is the fact that something was wrong with me and I would have to go to the hospital and have to be fixed terrified me. And also I came across this website, and I don't even know if it exists anymore, but it really rattled me. It was like the families of people who passed away from someone who had an eating disorder. And I don't know if I really ever understood that you could die from anorexia. I don't know if I really understood that. And so when I saw like all these like animated candles, like, I don't know, this is probably like 2006 or 7 or something, but like, all these like animated candles like flying around the screen with like messages from like, oh, we miss you, we love you so much. A switch flipped for me. And I was like, I could die. Like my family could have something like this up on this,
Wow.
It was really moving for me. And I just had the motivation all of a sudden, like, I don't think this is worth dying. Like yes, I have all this shame and this pain and this stuff I don't like about myself, but I don't think it's worth dying. So then I switched into like an obsession with like healthy eating, and I became orthorexic, which I'm sure you know all about.
Let's tell our listeners, because I also had orthorexia as a teen. So, but I have talked about it on the podcast, but not recently. So why don't you tell people what that means?
Sure. Yeah. Orthorexia is an obsession with healthy eating. So it's an obsession with clean eating, an obsession with like no processed foods. Like it can be different things, but for me, it was like no processed foods, no sugar, no fried food, that kind of like, and you're so anal and uptight about it that nothing will like get, like,
it's so sneaky because it's like, oh, she's such a healthy eater, right? And so you get praise for it. Oh, she's so healthy. You think this is good. I'm doing what doctors tell me to do, but it is sinister and dark, and it's the same thing, right? And orthorexia can also include over exercising for some people, so they're constantly exercising to burn off, for me, it was like, it was back in the 90s. So it was the fat-free era. And like every day for lunch, I would just eat steamed rice with soy sauce because there's no fat in it. And then I would have to work it off, right? Like that's orthorexia, it's like, oh, she exercises and she eats low fat. She's so healthy. And it's like, nope, I actually have disordered eating over here. But I love what you were saying about your mom, and we'll come back to orthorexia, because moms get all the blame for this, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the compassion, Kelsey, that you were showing for your mom, that you get it, that like, she'd never had a daughter with an eating disorder before. Who has, right? And so it's like, as mom, and now I am a mom, but as moms, you know, we're doing the best with what we got. And most of the time it's pretty damn good, you know, but and it's so tricky because we don't even realize. I remember I was in therapy and I'm talking to my therapist, and like all this stuff was coming up about my mom. And I was like, and I have still to this day, an amazing mother. Like my friends used to call her the June Cleaver, which is this old Beaver show, whatever. And like, she was like, my mama majored in home ec. Okay. Like the woman was a homemaker. She's amazing. And I was sitting there in therapy at like the age of like 28. And I was like, if I have this many issues about my mom and I had an amazing mom, like, oh my, like all, like it's the dynamic of mothers and daughters. We can't get away from it. I always say moms are crazy, but also like we get all the blame. And so I just wanted to really call out that I loved how you're speaking about your mom, because you recognize, yeah, your mom played a role, because all moms play a role in influencing us as children. But you also recognize that it's not because she was a bad mama. So I love that. Okay. So back to orthorexia. Kate, tell us where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom's amazing, by the way. She's one of the most amazing people I know. So shout out to all the moms. But yeah, my orthorexia manifested in, an extreme obsession with clean eating. I remember like we were sitting in and out one time and my brother tried to give me a French fry, and you could not have paid me to eat the French fry. It was one French fry. And I was like, no, like I made this huge deal about it. And like looking back, I'm like, that's so embarrassing. Like, I can't believe that. But in my brain, like that was truly the worst thing that you could do, was eat a French fry. And so, yes, I was eating, but I was also literally timing the schedule of my meals. I ate every 3 hours. I had a cooler that I would bring around with me to make sure that I would get my meals. And I was obsessed with the clean eating like approach, which is every 3 hours, blah, 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 blah. I started a food blog called Clean Teen Kelsey, which if you really want to look it up, it's still out there. I think it's cleanteenkelsey.wordpress.com or something. Anyways, I was obsessed with like blogging and writing all my healthy recipes. And that was fun until, again, it started to take over my life, which was my whole relationship with food up until this point, was that it ruled my life, whether I was exercising it off, planning it out, eating or not eating, counting calories. I had every single calorie like memorized. I knew the calorie count of everything, and I think I even had a friend one time. I was staying with her, and she said to me, she's like, "Oh, do you want cereal? Sorry, I think all of our measuring cups are dirty. I know you like to measure all your food." And I was like, that was the first time I realized, like, this is what I'm starting to be known for. And people see this, like people are observing me as this, so that was like a very interesting observation for me. And then gradually over time, it got better. I started to relax my obsession. I started to like test the waters, try little things like, is it the end of the world if I try to find more balance? And that was when I was introduced to intuitive eating. And that was like, an eye opener for me. I'd never even known that was a thing. Oh, wait, you can like listen to your body, and it started to get better after
that. So do you still practice intuitive eating?
I do. Yeah. I've like dabbled with like intermittent fasting and like all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, I always come back to intuitive eating because it's the thing I can maintain. And it's the thing that allows me to have the best like trust and relationship with my body and the food.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We were talking about how orthorexia is such a sneaky one because it looks so healthy. And for me, in my work, in my life and in my work, and in my experience with women, the difference, and this is because I'm imagining there are people out there that are listening that are like, oh, like, is that what I'm struggling with? Or is that what my daughter's maybe struggling with, or my niece or my student or whatever it is? And I'll tell you that for me, the way that you can check in with yourself about whether or not, you're like, am I, kind of veering toward disordered eating? Or am I actually just do I really prefer these foods, these particular foods? And the way that I am able to discern it for myself is I check in with my energy around it. And what I mean by my energy is really just my feelings. And so if I'm thinking to myself, for example, I'm going to go back to your example with your brother and the French fry. Somebody's offering me a French fry. And if I am feeling like I am like shrinking or tightening or feeling tense, and not because he's being pushy, but because it's like around this idea of eating this food, if it's feeling really like it's contracting me, it's closing me off, it's making me feel maybe anxious, but in particular controlling, then I
Mm,
know that I'm headed in an unhealthy direction. But when it
mm.
actually feels like freedom to me, and what I mean by that is feeling really expansive, and then my dog is like hacking in the background. Of course, I apologize. Hear
I
it?
love
I don't know what's going on. Of course, it gets on
it.
his throat right when I'm recording. But if it feels expansive, it feels like freedom. And so now, for example, my family and I go to In-N-Out all the time, and I choose not to eat the fries, but not because I feel like I have to control the food or control myself. It's actually because I just don't prefer them. I know they taste good, but I
Mm,
don't prefer them because I have shifted my preferences with food, and also because they don't make me feel great. Right. And so it actually feels like freedom to say no thank you to a fry, as opposed to feeling like restriction. And I think for a lot of us as women, especially women who have done a lot of dieting, we don't know the difference. We're like, oh, I just
mhm,
know I'm not supposed to eat that. Right. And that
mhm, mhm.
and that in and of itself starts to perpetuate the cycle, right? That starts to get a little bit dark and sinister, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I like that. That's powerful about checking in with the energy. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about. I know you have a. Tell me how you work with girls. This is probably a better question to ask. How do you work with girls? So if I'm listening to the podcast right now and I'm like, wow, I know a young person who I definitely would love to introduce to Kelsey Edwards, virtually or whatever.
Mm.
How do you work with girls?
Yeah, I mean, primarily it started out being through videos like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and social media. And then earlier this year, I actually released an online course called Squad Goals, which through like a lot of the research that I was doing, I talked with a lot of parents of teen girls and interviewed them and just like wanted to know more, like tell me more about the struggles you're dealing with. And they were all saying so consistently, like my daughter's really struggling with friends. She's really struggling with finding her tribe. She's really struggling. She opens Snapchat. She sees on the location map that all of her friends are hanging out without her and nobody invited her. She gets left out. She's trying to be the cool kid. She's trying to, compare herself to everybody. And so that was just like, I was like, I understand that because I struggled with friendships the same as that when I was a teenager. So I wanted to create something that is kind of like my flagship intro course to like help girls, yeah, manage that problem. And the biggest thing I've learned from my own life is that we can develop better friendships with other people when we have a better relationship with ourselves. And
Yeah.
so squad goals really goes into that. It helps you understand who you are better, helps you understand like what you want, what you need, and who like how you can connect to yourself deeper so that you can show up in a friendship in a different way. So it gives girls the tips to create better friendships, like how to find the right friends. It gives them the tools to maintain those friendships. And then it also gives them the tools to know when a friendship is not serving them anymore and when it's time to walk away. So there's a lot of like guide workbooks and assessments and things like that. So that's like the best way right now, other than following me on social media. I would say Squad Goals is like a way that your daughter can really get involved in some of the concepts that I'm teaching about self-love and confidence and relationship building and mindset and all of these things that I'm so passionate about is check
Yeah.
out Squad Goals. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, how do you teach that, Kelsey? I mean, I'm not asking you to teach it here on the podcast, but like I'm teaching confidence and teaching self-love. I mean, these are really complex notions, right? How do you approach it with girls?
Well, a big part of it, and you're right, it is complex because at the end of the day, like nobody can give you confidence, right? Like nobody can give you self love. It is
Right?
something that has to come from inside. I can't make you a confident person. I cannot make you someone who loves yourself. But I, I can help you understand the principles behind confidence or the principles behind self love. Like, why do we love ourselves? Or like, what happens when we compare ourselves to other people? Or what is your life like when we have confidence versus like when we approach life without confidence? We talk a lot about like posture. We talk about like how to hold yourself, how to communicate. And we talk, I think the biggest aspect of squad goals that I feel really passionate about is there's a lot of journaling, there's a lot of prompts, there's a lot of encouraging these girls to understand themselves better. Because I think that if I had had a stronger relationship with myself growing up, I probably wouldn't have dealt with so many of the issues that I dealt with. So
Yeah.
we find self love, we find confidence through getting to know ourselves And through realizing like, hey, I'm actually like pretty cool, and like not
Yeah.
everybody has to like me, right?
Yes.
For me to like myself. I like who I am. Like these things matter to me. These are the things I care about. I'm caring, I'm loving, I'm kind. And like as you get to know the intricate like parts of who you are at your core, you start to have more confidence and more compassion and more self-love. And then that changes the way that you approach the world because inside is good. So now you can be good outside,
Right, right,
Um,
right.
so that's kind of my approach is like, yeah, strengthening the relationship with the self and so that you can bring a better version of yourself to everything else.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned earlier, you actually said when we were talking about, friendships, just touching on it in the beginning, and you had said, I'm still learning. And I
Yeah.
wrote that down because what struck me about that is there's a book, I'm holding it up, but my listeners can't hear it, but it's called The Confidence Code, which and it's actually, there is a teen version too. So Kelsey, you should totally
Oh,
grab it.
cool.
But
Cool.
it is such a fantastic book because it really breaks down confidence and why we women are suffering from what I call a confidence crisis, but then also kind of, how to fix that. But one of the biggest pieces to confidence is actually having a growth mindset, right? Which is a concept coined by Carol Dweck out of Stanford. But very simply put, it's the idea that I can learn, I can grow, I can change, right? So it's this idea of if I fail a math test or if I don't get a great score on a math test, it's not me. What happens is a lot of times girls and women internalize that to make it mean something about themselves. I'm bad at math. But boys will not internalize it typically. And we're speaking in generalizations, but this is according to the research. So the literature, boys will be like, oh, I needed to have studied harder. That was a really hard math test. I'm going to go back and do it again. Now, not every boy, of course, but here's the difference is whether or not the girl's actually bad at math and the boy is maybe in denial, maybe he really sucks at math, but he thinks it was, the nature of the test. It doesn't really matter what the truth is, because the difference is that he's going to go for it again. And he will keep going until he gets it because he believes he can grow and learn in that area until he gets it. Whereas the girl, if she thinks it's intrinsically something wrong with herself, she'll quit. And so what happens and the way that confidence gets built is by actually taking a risk, failing at it, and then going at it again and going at it again, right? And it's that persistence, which is what we see boys do that we often don't see girls doing. And so that erodes our confidence, it erodes our self-trust. And so when you said, I'm still learning, this little light went off because I was like, Kelsey has a growth mindset, right? It's like you created a course on friendships and you also said, I'm still learning this myself, right? Yeah. And that's this recognition that, and it's so funny because you mentioned perfectionism earlier. A lot of times women are perfectionists and we won't create it until we're already perfect experts at it. But just the fact that you're like, nope, I know enough to create this course and I'm still working on it myself. And that's actually what makes me such an expert is because I'm actively working in this field right now on the same things, right? And so then you can actually guide people much better than if you think you have to be perfect at it. So I love that about you, Kelsey. I love your growth mindset. And I love your story so much. Kelsey, is there anything else that you want to share with listeners today? Anything that you're kind of, maybe anything that we didn't touch on or anything that you really hope that they take away from this podcast today?
Yeah, well, thank you for pointing that out too, because I guess I hadn't made that connection, but you're right. Like that is a big part of like the challenges that I personally have overcome is that I was like such a perfectionist. I mean, like to the T. And I'm like emphasizing this just in case anyone's daughters are also this way. Like I was so by the book. I was like perfect student. I never failed. I always got A's. Like I was overanalyzing everything. I had such high anxiety in school and like homeschooling, of course. But and then I went to public school for 1 year when I moved to Utah. Really high anxiety then. Just like I guess I'm just wanting to emphasize that like that is possible. Like to go from this like really uptight, stressed out like teenager to someone who can develop a growth mindset and be okay with the fact that I am not perfect. I make mistakes. I am still learning all the time. Yes, I have some really powerful like realizations and understandings about mindset and growth and friendships and confidence. But there are plenty of days where I myself am like, didn't do that great, like
Totally.
didn't handle that situation. Not my best work,
Right. Yeah.
I'm still working on it too. And so I really appreciate you pointing that out. And I'm such an advocate of the power that we have to change our own lives and our own mindset. And that like you can really become anything you want to be. Like your beliefs about yourself, they are just stories that you have told yourself over and over and over again until they become beliefs,
Yes.
And so if you can change your story, then you can change your beliefs. So if your story is like, I am not confident, or even I overthink everything, I'm so anxious all the time, that's your belief about yourself, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm an overthinker, I'm an anxious person. But if you change that belief, like I used to have the belief, I'm not consistent, I don't finish things, blah, 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 blah. And then of course, that's what I started seeing manifesting. But now I've changed my belief. Like, actually, I'm very consistent. Actually, I work really hard. I finish the things I start. And that's how you become the version of you want to be. If you're changing your beliefs and recognizing like this growth mindset, like you said, and that there's abundance and there's so many opportunities, instead of being trapped in these scarcity stories that keep you small. So that would be the last little thing I would tack on to that is, it's possible. And if your daughter is struggling, I understand, but it's so possible for her to grow and to become like the version of her that you've always dreamed she could be, and that she could dream that she can be as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet your mama is so proud of you.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope I make her proud. I want to make my mom proud.
Kelsey, where can people find you? Of course, this will be in the show notes, but where can they find you?
Yeah, it's Kelsey Marie Edwards on Instagram, Kelsey Marie Edwards on TikTok. And then YouTube is just Kelsey Edwards. But honestly, if you look for my name, Kelsey Edwards, pretty much anywhere, you'll find me. I'm also an actor. So I've got, you can see some movies that I've been in. I was in a movie called Minor Details that most teenage girls really liked like 10 years ago. So I don't know. Your daughter may or may not know of that. And then I have a new TV series that's coming out this fall, September 8th, actually. So you can keep an eye out for that. It's called Underdeveloped. But you can find me in the media, and you can find me on social media.
We will definitely find you and be watching your new series September 8th. I'm super excited about that. Thank you so much, Kelsey, for coming on to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Life You Crave. I lost 30 pounds years ago without dieting, willpower, or deprivation. I'm on a mission to help other women, including you, do the same. You can book a free weight loss strategy session with me over at leahpinelli.com. That's LIAPINELLI.com. See you on our next call or on the next episode. And remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on iTunes.